What I want to talk about this afternoon, and thank you very much for the invite to talk to you. Hi there. You all right? One of my former colleagues from Coventry University, Sylvester. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the future of serious games and immersive technologies. I have to say I'm really pleased to be able to follow the previous presentation because I agree with every single word you said. I've been trying to promote the same message myself over a number of years to people who are involved in the use of technology for education and learning. Part of my presentation may be a little bit philosophical, and I'm hoping that it will be controversial, and I'm hoping that it will give you some food for thought to give you an idea of really some of the things that are likely to place within society over the next few years as a result of it. And my argument is, and the thing I want to take you away, want you to take away, is that immersive technologies, serious games, and the concept of gamification are really going to play a very important role in addressing some of the most important challenges we face in business and society. And I hope at the end of the presentation that I will have articulated some of the reasons behind this statement. Now you'll see from my grey hair that I've been around quite a bit longer than most of you. This was me as a baby in the pram. Okay, I was born into a world without computers. Well, it was not strictly true because the Ferranti Mark I was in existence in 1949 in Manchester University. A very early representation of it. We didn't have a telephone. Most people didn't have a telephone, and very few people had a car. That was the world that I was born into. My only entertainment in those days was a wind-up gramophone record player, and I used to play the same record over and over again. It was called the Joneses' Laughing Record by Spike Jones and the City Slickers, and it comprised of somebody trying to play the Bumblebee Symphony, and then somebody sneezes, somebody starts to laugh, and eventually everybody starts laughing. And I remember as a child just sitting there and giggling my head off. So we were entertained by trivial things in those days. But this was the world that I lived in, and it's a world really quite different from today. You know, the very first point, and I promise you I didn't alter my presentation as a result of what you said, but in those days the role of the teacher was to transfer knowledge. You know, we sat there and we listened and we absorbed knowledge and information like sponges. And that partly was due to the fact that it was the teachers who had more knowledge than the students. And so that was a natural role for them to play. In those days, we also knew all of our neighbours. We never locked the door in our street because we had no fear of crime. In those days, we rarely travelled outside of the community. The first time I ever went abroad was when I was 17, and my parents paid for me to go on a school trip to Moscow. And the reason why they were so keen for me to go was because they thought that I would never get any other chances in my life to go abroad. Now, as people that know me well, now I seem to be travelling all the time. And tomorrow, unfortunately, I can't be with you. I will be on my way to Kuching to speak at another conference in Sarawak. But in those days, people rarely travelled outside of their community. And in those days, banks were banks, grocers were grocers. You know, you had your own industry and your business and your profession, and you stuck to your knitting, as they say in England. You stayed within your industry because you didn't have the knowledge, you didn't have the market to do anything else. We also, in those days, built a career in the same company. I joined British Telecom, I got a scholarship with them, and I imagined that I would spend my career there. Doesn't happen. Today, we change jobs very frequently. And we also tended to date and marry within our own community, and our individual choice and power to influence the world was generally very limited. But even in those days, although they weren't called serious games, games and simulations were very important in helping to develop our interests and our future careers. And I remember, not for the same reason as the nurses' kit, but playing doctors and nurses when I was a child. that was more to do to find out what girls look like rather than any medical interest. But so the point is that society was hierarchical, it was really quite structured and regulated, and there was the phrase knowledge is power. In those days, if you knew something, then you had some power. So if you wanted to be a profession in any sort of area, whether it's medicine, education and health, you went through years of training, and those years of training gave you a status and they equipped you to be the service provider in whatever profession you were, whether it was a midwife, a doctor, a lawyer. You went through lots of training to be able to be the service provider, and you were the go-to person for that information if you wanted to know about things. Of course, digital technologies changed everything, and this is a picture of the very first computer that I sold when I worked for IBM. It looks like a Russian television set. It was called the IBM 5120, and it was the forerunner of the IBM PC. And I sold one of these to the Skegness Pier Company in 1980. And it had a fantastic memory capacity of 64K. How about that? And 2 floppy disks with disk capacity of 2.4 megabytes. And I took this to the Skegness Pier Company and I showed them how to use what we called a 4th generation programming language called BRADS, Business Report Application Development System. And what they wanted to do was to be able to manage the records of the slot machines that they had in various clubs around Lincolnshire. So I very quickly set up a file structure, keyed some information, and they were producing reports within half an hour of me going there. And they were so impressed that they not only ordered one, they gave me a free ride on a virtual reality ride on Skegness Pier called the Jules Verne Astroglide, which was like a rocket laid on its side, and you went inside and there was a little cinema and hydraulics moved it up and down, which was very advanced in those days. That was, saying, about 1979, 1980. So digital technologies changed everything, but really what digital technology were trying to do were to simply replace books. So they provided access to information and knowledge, and if they were providing tests, they were just simple quizzes and decision tree games. They were not the kind of exploration or inquiry that we just heard from the previous presentation. But as technology developed and the capabilities grew, and I have to say that I really believe that the games industry is extremely important in any economy as a driver for innovation and enterprise. And a lot of the technology developments you see today in everyday life come out of innovations from the games industry. The games industry have a marketplace where there is a demand for realistic simulations, and the games industry find ways of achieving those results, which then find their way into other applications. You'll see that with an example that I show you with the Microsoft Kinect later on in the presentation. But this is it's quite an old video now, and I remember the first time I showed this was to some surgeons, a surgeons conference in Edinburgh in the UK, and they all stood up and applauded at the end of it. You will find it probably very simplistic, but the idea that was this is a government-funded project to demonstrate how the fidelity of computer games could present physicians and medical specialists with examples of medical conditions that they could learn from. So they wanted to create a realistic simulation of someone dying from a head wound. And in the process, develop the tools and the technologies that make it commercially possible and worthwhile to be able to apply this same technology into other areas. So this is the video. So first it was a 3D scan, and then they used their own games engine to develop algorithms which could manipulate that face to create human emotions. So it provided a full range of facial movements, So they could create these emotions on any 3D scan of anyone's head. So they could scan your head and they could make it appear that you were happy or surprised or whatever. This is a guy, one of their lead designers, he's called Dave. So this video is called Dying Dave, and you'll see why in a minute. They also wanted to show the physical behaviour of things like respiration, to be able to simulate that realistically, the whole condition. And the whole idea was to explore the importance and relevance of fidelity when you're involved with serious games. So this links medical data to the animation showing what happens when somebody has a head wound and they die. So this guy's going to die within 60 seconds. And that's his normal self, and there's with the head wound. And you can see the condition in the top right-hand corner, capillary refill, health, etc. And everything, the way the blood flows, the colour of the skin, is linking this animation to the medical data to provide a realistic simulation. He doesn't look too happy. And you can see the arteries trying to pump blood into his brain. He's sweating, his colour's turned grey. He's dead. And they used this same technology to address a challenge in the northwest region of the health authority, because, and I hesitate to mention this because it may be the same in Singapore, in one region of the UK, if you went into accident emergency in the hospital, you stood a 20% chance of coming out worse than you went in. And the reason was that untrained trainee doctors were the ones who worked in A&E. And so they didn't always provide the right kind of medical interventions. So they used the same kind of techniques to be able to, first of all, generate very realistic avatars of any age, any gender, any ethnicity, and link medical data to simulate medical conditions and allow trainee doctors to experiment on these avatars. So they perform an intervention, they see the result 15 minutes later, and so on. So that when you came into accident and emergency, hopefully they would have encountered your condition and you would be able to go out a little bit better than you went in. So today we live in a very different world. Knowledge and skills, I would say information, is accessible 24/7. We've got the digital natives who are now far more capable of multitasking than I ever was when I was younger. And we are in a totally different world. And teachers today should not be transfers of knowledge. They should be coaches and mentors and facilitators. They should facilitate the process of inquiry and encourage you. In fact, even when I was a child, the teacher I remember was not a teacher who passed on facts. It was a teacher who read me stories from Biggles and encouraged my sense of adventure and wanting to explore these worlds that Biggles explored. So good teachers are the same today as they were then. Good teachers should always have been coaches and mentors, but today they really have to be, particularly as students get older, because you'll find, particularly at university, many students know more than their lecturers. If they have a passion or an interest, they will learn the knowledge. And that's why it's very important to adopt the approach that you do and say, what do you think? Because the answer will be out there. We know very few of our neighbours, and we spend a lot of time travelling outside of our company. Now we don't have banks as banks. We've got Virgin Record Company is now an airline company. We have grocers like Sainsbury's becoming banks because technology empowers and enables people who have no experience and no brand to be able to transfer their values and skills into another area of business. We change jobs and companies often. We date via the internet and tend not to marry. I've had several experiences of internet dating, and I can assure you that it does change the nature of relationships. It changes the nature of how you see the opposite sex, and I don't think necessarily that it's a particularly good thing, because it makes me, it certainly made me, far more, not demanding exactly, but you know, I don't intend to get married again, but I would like to have lots of good friends. And our individual choice and power is far is more unlimited now than it's ever been. Through the internet we can communicate, and this is one of the real issues with society today. We are the most connected society there's ever been in history, and yet I would argue that paradoxically we are the most disconnected society there's ever been in history. And by disconnected, I mean that there is a disconnect between our actions and the consequences of our actions. There's a disconnect between the power that we have to communicate and influence other people and the responsibility that we bear for those actions. And I think that is one of the issues that is a source of a lot of the problems in society today. So today's society is networked and asymmetric. When I mean asymmetric, what I mean by that is that individuals have a disproportionate level of power compared to large organisations. In the past, power has been related to wealth, industrial capacity and what have you. Today, those relationships don't necessarily follow, and in the military field there is a term known as asymmetric warfare, and this is one of the problems in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, is that a lot of the rebels and the revolutionaries, whatever you like to call them, are able to wield disproportionate disruption to well-armed military forces. And this is a real challenge for the military. And a lot of that comes from the power of the technologies that we have available today. So today we have personal agents like my iPad. It took me a long time to wean myself off my Windows laptop, but now I would rather take my iPad with me anywhere, and it helps me. We also, and this is part of the message that I have today, a range of innovative interfaces in the way we interact with technology that are going to cause some really disruptive change. I'll show a little bit about this video, but this is a video using a device called MindPlay or NeuroSky, which looks like a headphone with a little contact on your forehead, and it allows you to use your brain power to control technology. So this is a little game to illustrate that, where I have to concentrate in order to be able to blow up a can of Red Bull. I've got to concentrate at the right level to flip the can lid off. If I concentrate too hard, I'll blow it up. If I don't concentrate enough, nothing happens. So this is just a recording of me playing this game called MindPlay. And they developed it because they saw it as having some commercial potential for selling a brand. So I have to focus to open the can and not focus too hard so the can blows up. So there is the can, and you can see the meter in the bottom corner showing my level of concentration. And as I maintain the level of concentration in the right zone, the can starts to shake and it opens. So this is, you might think it's a trivial example, but we are at the threshold of being able to monitor things about the environment and the human body and use that information within gamification ideas. So science fiction is very soon becoming reality, and it's often said that what you see in Hollywood you will actually see on the streets maybe in 5 or 6 years' time after the film has been made. The company who developed Dying Dave used this to develop an immersive experience, and it's one of the few research projects or proper research projects that's trying to evaluate the effectiveness of games-based learning against traditional methods. And the target group were paramedics who needed to be trained to deal with explosions in city centres, to be able to triage the casualties effectively and make sure they saved as many people as possible. Now, traditionally, you would use mannequins or you would use actors to play the role of the victims. So they had two control groups of 50 paramedics, different ages, different experiences with technology. They put 50 through being trained with the game, 50 through traditional methods, and they all took the same test at the exam. And this is the game that the paramedics played. So they produced this representation of a city centre after an explosion. So just in your story, you're setting this scene, the scenario, painting the picture, and then creating realistic visualizations. And the paramedics have to go through the proper triage protocols for each victim, and then assess a course of action and label that as requiring immediate or urgent attention. You might notice that as you see each of the casualties, there's a striking similarity with Dying Dave. So either they've used the same avatar, or he comes from a very unfortunate family. They were perhaps all shopping in the city centre together. So you can see the process. You have to go through the correct protocols in the correct sequence. You've got to label them correctly. You've got to do them, carry out these triage activities within an appropriate time scale. And when you've gone through all of these exercises, you're assessed. And this was a genuinely interdisciplinary project. So this wasn't just a team of games developers who present this in isolation. It was a partnership which we had medical specialists from university in Manchester. There were the games developers. There were pedagogical experts, all working together as a team. I think this is the last casualty. They've all been triaged, and then they are all assessed, and you could see how you did with the triage of each individual casualty. And they found that the paramedics who were trained in this way achieved significantly better results. And what they, when they did the post-test survey, the common theme was that the ones who were trained using the game felt more engaged. They really believed in the situation and the environment, and they felt really that there was a greater urgency to triage it. They felt that they got some control over the outcome. So the point I'm trying to make is this kind of unprecedented levels of choice and power that we've been given by technology creates a society which is very disconnected between choice and consequence, power and accountability, and rights and responsibility. And I would argue that it's this disconnect which causes many of the challenges we face. And a couple of those challenges, close to home for me, one is obesity, and the other one is the ageing society. That's me, in case you didn't recognise me. And that was my mum, who had dementia, and she passed away a year ago. And she went through the typical stages of independent living, then having to go into a care home, and eventually into a hospital, back into a care home where she passed away. So I have quite an insight into the care that she received, and an insight into the stages. Myself, I used to say that I was technically obese. I use the word technically because I didn't like to think of myself as obese, but my body mass index told me I was obese, right? And this is one of the challenges of society. And going back to the previous slide, is that I've grown up in a world where in the UK we have a National Health Service which is free at the point of delivery. So that is regarded to me as a human right. So no matter whether I abuse my body, what I do to my body, I expect to get the right kind of medical treatment without any responsibility for my actions. Now, just about 3 months ago, well, it's a combination of circumstances really, I subscribed to a site called 23andme.com where you send your sample away and they give you a DNA analysis, which I did it because I wanted to see if I was related to any Russians or any Asians in the distant past, and how much of Neanderthal man. Apparently I've got 5% Neanderthal man in me, so be careful. But one of the things it does, it shows predilection to certain medical conditions, and one of them was I've got a higher than average likelihood of getting type 2 diabetes. And because I was overweight, I wanted to do something about it. And the thing that made me do something about it was this little device. So I read about it on a BBC website. It's called the Jawbone Up bracelet, and it measures my physical activity, measures the amount of calories I burn, it measures the sleep I have and the quality of the sleep I have. And it represents these visually for me, and it allows me to put in information about what I'm eating so that I can understand how my exercise and my eating patterns can control my weight. So for the first time, I had the tools for the job. And I had them here on this bracelet. So I decided to use myself as a human laboratory. As I said, I got this 3 months ago, and I started by just walking the recommended amount, or at least the recommended amount every day, 10,000 steps, which is about 5 miles. But I ate the same as I did before, and I measured the impact on my weight. But this last 3 weeks I was on holiday in France, and I really went for it. I realised that I also had to cut down on my calories. And I worked out a formula from the data that you'll see in a minute, what I needed to do to lose a certain amount of weight. So this was through inquiry and experimentation. I worked out my own fat index. I worked at an index of 1. If I achieved an index of 1, I would lose 0.2 kilos a day. And if I achieved an index of 3, I could get up to 0.6 kilos a day. And the index was based on the number of calories that I burnt minus the number of calories that I consumed divided by the number of calories consumed. So if I effectively consumed 4 times the amount of calories I ate, I got a reasonable chance of losing 0.6 of a kilo in a day. I'll tell you, it worked, because I'm now 15 kilos lighter than I was 10 weeks ago. And if any of you fly on budget airlines and you have a weight limit of 10 kilos in your luggage, you realise 10 kilos is a lot to be carrying about. So I've lost 15. So looking at the way games and simulations, how do we address some of the challenges of society? If we accept that we're going to have more obese people, we're going to have more problems with dementia, how do we tackle this problem to improve the economics of healthcare? And we can use games and simulations to train, orientate and assess staff. These are screenshots from some serious games, one of which is used in a care home to present carers with difficult situations and allow them to make decisions. And that also is very good at assessing the psychological profile of people who want to go to be carers to make sure that they are suitable for the job. You've got casual games which increasingly are being used to help to develop your cognitive skills and mental agility. These are not serious games, they're commercial casual games off the shelf that you can use for that kind of purpose. And games in the past have been used to encourage behavioural change. In fact, there's a game called OBS, which has been designed to change obesity, where you effectively you have a proxy self, a virtual character that you have to control the eating of, and you see how that character changes, and hopefully it changes you. But for me, it wouldn't. Just as you were talking about the difference between swimming and learning about swimming, I could read everything about diets and exercise till the cows come home, but it didn't make a single difference because I didn't feel that I had the tools and the motivation to be able to do it. Okay, there are other ways that public bodies have sought to encourage exercise. I showed this video this morning. This is in Stockholm, where most people use the escalator, and the city authority wanted to help to get people to choose the stairs. So what they did overnight was to make some alterations to the stairs, and then they just observed what happened the next day. They turned the stairs into a piano. So there's a lot of inquiry by learning. I don't know whether anybody learned to play the piano stairs in any meaningful way. And I don't know how long this experiment lasted. But that was the result that they were hoping for. Technology supports reflective, personalised and adaptive learning and the wisdom of the crowd. And these are projects that European projects I'm involved in, aimed at that particular approach to learning. And that's one of the observations that I've made is that technology, artificial intelligence, the wisdom of the crowd, cloud computing, a lot of these things are converging to enable or empower technology to provide that personalized adaptive learning. So in other words, when you're using the technology is assessing you and adapting the way it responds and what it delivers to you according to your not only your capabilities but also your interests and your passions. And I understand that in some countries they are experimenting with, so that when people go through the education system, they don't go through a standard one-size-fits-all, they go through something which is much more personalised. I mentioned the use of the games industry and its influence in other areas. This is a Microsoft Kinect project with a Spanish company designed to provide some rehabilitation for physical impairment. So these are the kinds of things that they're trying to improve, and the physical conditions that they're trying to address with this. Elderly people, people with brain damage. And what it does is provides the clinician with a panel that allows the clinician to configure the therapy to the individual, and increasingly you will see the technology being able to diagnose particular physical conditions. So the patient stands in front of the screen and they have to control the little stick man and respond to the exercises, the steps, movements of the body and of the hands. We've got a friend in the audience here, Payne from Korea. He spoke last year, and you can ask him about his walking game for helping rehabilitation or helping the physical capabilities of older people by allowing them to control a walking pad to walk through a virtual environment, to encourage them with an activity they enjoy. So although this is a focus on providing some physical benefit to the patient, I think we should also remember that these technologies, sensor technologies, will increasingly be used as part of the diagnosis of the problem. So what I would argue is that we are really on the threshold of something very exciting. where gamification, sensor technologies, a whole range of technologies, social networking coming together to allow us to embed what I call pervasive games that could help transform society by giving people the tools and the responsibility to be able to manage their own health or manage the environment or the things which are becoming critical issues in the world that we live in today. And we do need to do it because we do not have the resources currently to support the aging population and lifestyle related issues. And you can see the statistics in here that they expect the number of people with dementia to double in the space of 20 years. So what do? There's a limit to what you can do as far as training people, limit to what you can do as far as the budget to be able to manage these. We need to find preventative methods that make a difference to the way we behave and the way we are responsible for our own health and our activities. And I would say sensor data, games, visualization of sensor data, tracking our lives with our permission, linked to games and simulation will help us to provide those kinds of feedback and control mechanisms that I think are going to be very important for the future of a sustainable society. And already in the UK, they are involved in pilot schemes where obese patients are being passed over to a gym. So they're not being managed by the GP or sent for gastric band surgery. They are being sent to a gym with the proper tools and the proper monitoring and management. And what they found from the early stages of the study is that it costs about 10% of the traditional medical surgical solutions to do this with significantly better results. So just as I talked about earlier on airlines becoming banks, those of you who are involved in the medical profession, you will see all kinds of other players coming into the health arena who have a knowledge and an understanding of these technologies and the games and motivations and will be helping to provide services that currently you provide. And one of the things I'm interested whilst I'm here in Singapore in the limited time I have is to see whether there is an interest in looking at business models which adopt this approach to solving some of the health problems. I'm involved in a project which looks almost 99% to be funded, which would support people like my mum, using games and sensor technologies to support independent living by using them to improve cognitive and physical capabilities amongst older people. So in this living laboratory of gamification for my obesity challenge, these are unretouched photographs. This was me at the end of May. It's me play a character in a play. You can see how big my stomach was, and I stand before you now looking a little bit like that. What time am I due to finish? Sorry, about now. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I was going to plug in my band and show you how many steps I walked today. If I can do that very quickly, this is the kind of graphical information you show, but this is just the process that I do. Okay. So this shows me I had 70% of my target sleep last night. That was mainly because the train I wanted to catch from Kuala Lumpur was full, so I had to catch a train 7 hours later and didn't get here till 11 o'clock. And then had to make a few changes in my presentation in the middle of the night, so my sleep pattern looked like that. I had 3 hours 41 deep sleep, 1 hour 59 light sleep. I slept for 5 hours 40. My target is 8 hours. Today I've had 866 calories, and Ivan will verify that I had roast potato, salmon, green snap beans and coffee for my lunch. And this is the total calories 505. This is nutritional data that I had from that meal. And now, so from the time I got up, so this is what I do, just plug in the band. It's got enough battery for about another 10 days. And it will say I've added the paltry sum of 1,123 steps, which my target is 10,000. If I tell you that when I was on holiday, some days I did 55,000 steps. But that was a combination of walking and dancing for 3 hours. 3 hours dancing is worth 15,000 steps. So it's very good value. And this is my total calorie burn. Only 74 calories with active burn. Some days I was burning, well, my highest was actually 6,000 calories. So that's the way it worked. I'm very nearly at the end of my presentation, so I'll just finish with some slides. So, sensor technology, this combination of social networks, virtual worlds, all the things that you've come to this conference to learn about are creating new business models to empower individual citizens and help us build a more sustainable future. This is a plug for my book called Gadgets to God, which talks about how technology has changed in my lifetime. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Let's put our hands together. Okay, we are taking orders for the wristband. Anybody wants to order a wristband?
You want a band?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was just ooh and ah. I said, I need that myself, you know. Okay. So where can we get this band? Is it for sale?
Well, I ordered it through Amazon. So
Okay.
you can order through Amazon. It's in the UK, it's £99. And all the apps are free. And they also synchronize with other devices as well. So at home, I've got a wireless bathroom scale. And this story is absolutely true. This wireless bathroom scale communicates with my iPad. So normally at the same time every morning, I weigh myself and it transfers my weight onto the application so that if I look at the trends in my lifestyle, I'm measuring calories burned against calories consumed. I can plot week by week, month by month, but I can plot almost anything against anything else. And if I plot it against weight, okay, it's still showing my weight as 99.3 because the reason for that is that I didn't sync my weigh scale last time I was home. But what actually happened, this is perfectly true, and I say it's like an old music hall joke. I lost so much weight that my weighing scales didn't recognize me. It's perfectly true because when I set it up, every morning I get in, I'd stand on the scales and it would have my name at the top, or an abbreviation of my own, Dave. So Dave, you weigh 99.3 kilograms. This time I stood on my scale and it said 91.2 kilograms, but there was a question mark against, so it didn't recognize me. Yeah, so you can order from Amazon and there's lots of applications that integrate with it.